My name is Chris Lonchesky, and I will go last with my esteemed colleagues here. I'm going to start to the right with Antonia DeFeo, Alex Robinson, and Alex Chamberlen and Josh Robinson. Already screwed up one strike against the American. We are going to be talking about digital platforms, and this is a subject matter that could take forever. So we're going to stay on time, get cracking right on with it. If you could spend 2 minutes, a little bit of background, and we'll move right to the left, left to right if you're watching. And I'll go last quickly, and we'll sum it all up.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Antonia. I work for a digital consultancy called 7 League based in London. We work with a number of clients both on home soil around Europe and across the pond in the States. We basically help mainly with content strategy, long-term digital strategy. I specialise in live events, so I help people, teams, governing bodies, other organisations with live event communications. And I head up our relationship with the Ultimate Fighting Championships, a mayor office based in London. I work there almost full time, helping them with their long-term digital strategy, content production for live events, and social media and digital platforms.
Hi, my name is Alex Chamberlen. I work for Omnigon Communications. We're also a digital consultancy, but in a slightly different way, in that we design and build platforms, and we manage systems for big sporting clients and also clients in media and entertainment. And we provide consultancy around technological and strategic issues. So we work with clients like the PGA Tour, for whom we manage all of their digital assets. We work with NASCAR across all of their mobile portfolio. We work with a number of other sort of sports and media and entertainment rights holders in the States. And we started a business here in the UK in January of this year, and we are working with what was formerly known as the IRB, as you all know, if you're listening this morning. We work with World Rugby, and we're building the mobile app for the Rugby World Cup next year. We've done some work with Manchester City and a couple of other clients here, and that's more than enough about me.
I'm Josh from Synergy. So Synergy's your classic sponsorship agency, right? So PR, experiential and digital, although straight away that's kind of wrong, because the way digital works at Synergy is it kind of moves through PR and events. My job title's kind of wrong too. I think it's more about content. I know that's a cliche, but it is. So 1 minute we might find ourselves doing this real-time stuff that we were talking about before for RBS around Six Nations, for example. The next minute, at the moment, we're making a big sort of short film for Royal Salute, the whiskey brand, around polos. That's a big, beautiful film that sits predominantly on YouTube and then elsewhere. And then we may build something. So around Commonwealth Games, we built an opinion hub for BP on the Commonwealth Games site, where fans could sort of say what they thought about key stories that were happening throughout the event. So it's all about kind of content for us, and therefore lots of different platforms.
Fair enough. My name is Chris Lonchesky. I'm the founder and chairman of Phoenicia Sport. Many of you know me from some of the other companies I've been fortunate to have. I rolled into a larger publicly held agency a few years ago here in Knightsbridge. I spent the last 4 years with Phoenicia inside Comcast Spectacor, where I was privileged enough to work alongside NBC and our Comcast cable partners. In a lot of the spaces, digital certainly was in our world. We're going to walk around this business with some of the smartest and the brightest people here. One of the things, and you, that's right. That's right. Boy, you're good for leaning into those pitches. That's wonderful. The reality of it is we're hoping that, and we discussed this before, and I see Jim Black right there. We go back always. But the fact is that we want you to walk away with something that you should know that you didn't know walking in the room today. Something that you're going to be reading about here in the next 2 weeks or even next 6 months. One of your failures, I'll talk about ours at Comcast. I'll talk about how we lucked in, real failed up with the Olympic strategy that everybody talks about digitally. And we're trying to get a sense of that no one truly knows the space, but these are as close to getting it right as you're going to see. And it's an ever-evolving strategy. I think all of you have great client lists. I mean, these are rosters to kill for, as they would say. I'm going to defer to Antonia to start first about the success of the UFC. There's no way you can strip digital away from that. And what you're doing here in the EMA is just tremendous. Talk a little bit about where you think it's going, where you've been, and what you're going to see.
Thank you. Yeah, this year we've had quite a good year in terms of social media success, particularly with the UFC in the EMEA region. We've had 5 live events in the region this year. We started off in London in March, then we went to Abu Dhabi, then to Berlin, then to Dublin, which was a tremendous success, and then we just recently got back from Stockholm in October. One thing that we were quick to establish were obviously we don't just represent the UFC as the UK, we have the whole EMEA region to look after, so we have to cater for a tremendous amount of different languages, different regions, different time zones, so you have to be incredibly careful how you tailor that content to suit the people consuming it at different times of day. Also, we had to take stock of the channels that the UFC was present on in this region. The brand tone of voice is incredibly different in this region compared to what it is in America, for example. So we have to look at sculpting that voice and the brand messaging to suit everyone who is engaging with our brand within our region. Facebook is a huge driver for us. We've done a lot of work specifically around geo-targeting this year. That is one of our main successes actually with the UFC. We've seen direct ticket sales through social media by talking to people in their local language, geo-targeting to the country they're based in. That was a huge driver for us in terms of ticket sales online. We saw great success with that, and actually I think that's something that brands should consider more. If there's one thing I'd like to say today is probably if someone asked you how well you know your audience online, if one of your sponsors or partners or even someone in your team turned around and said, oh, you know, what's sort of the fan base of your audience on Facebook? It's really beneficial to be able to answer that question easily and straight away, because that demographic is forever changing, and you have to be able to adapt quickly to cater for, you know, a quick spike in audience in one new country in a language that perhaps you might not have sort of language expertise in or content expertise in, but to be able to cater on demand. So that's something that we've fortunately with the team at the UFC have managed to do quite successfully this year.
Let me ask you, in the transfer from dealing with independent channels and different relationships and speaking in native tongue, if you will, moving over to a group like yourselves, okay, just for a minute here. The roster is fantastic. I mean, PGA, USTA, a bit of a stumping, but the fact is that how do you tell them to be a good client? A lot of folks in this room deal with clients all the time. You deal with some of the highest profile clients, and candidly, at Comcast and NBC would tell them that you're not being a good client. How do you address that when you come in with a certain expertise and they say, well, that's great, but this is what we're going to do in digital?
I don't think you tell them that they're not a good client unless you know them extremely well, and you're probably drinking something late at night. I think what you try to do is to explain the success that you've had with other clients by following certain processes and certain disciplines, and you know, everything that we do at Omnigon is the same, whether the client is a sort of 7-figure client or a 5-figure client. We apply the same sort of disciplined approach to business discovery, getting to know clients' business objectives, what the requirements are for that particular project, and agreeing all of that up front with the client and making sure that we write everything down, which a lot of agencies don't do, frankly. They just, you know, take a brief and execute it, and then halfway through the process they find that things start to unravel because they haven't actually sat down and really agreed what the KPIs are up front. So we're very specific about instilling that as a discipline from the beginning. If clients don't like it, then they usually do like it once the process begins, because they can talk to our clients about how we work anyway, and you know, check us out with some of the people that you've mentioned. And once we get into a process, I think they feel very confident that we know what we're doing. We deliver for clients around live events day in, day out. I mean, you know, NASCAR has thousands of races and events every year. The PGA Tour supports 130 live events every year. So if a client comes to us, I think they kind of respect that if we know how to deliver for these kinds of clients, then we're probably worth not listening to in that sense, but hopefully they'll know we're worth working with. And I think once we get into the process and explain how we like to do things, it becomes pretty obvious that that's a good way to work. But we wouldn't say, you know what, you're an idiot client, go away. So that doesn't really help anyone.
Well, let me, and I'll be the idiot client on this side. I sit on the board of a new golf network that launched the same point in time when the Ryder Cup did here. And one of the great storylines for us was Paul Azinger not being the captain of the U.S. You guys over there, Josh, did a great job with B&W in the Ryder Cup. In fact, probably one of the hallmark takeaways from the entire event. For us in the States, it was a miserable week. everything was bad about it. But from your perspective and from the advertiser's perspective, how did you use the Ryder Cup so effectively for BMW?
It was simple, really. So the brand piece was around driving performance. So it was all about helping fans keep their eye very closely on how the two teams were performing, frankly. And it links to a point I was trying to make earlier on, really, about not necessarily feeling you have to use social media to drive massive retweets and massive sharing. We used Twitter predominantly just to feed fans with really beautifully designed little snapshots of moments and scores that were happening out on the course, which may sound incredibly simple, like they could get that information from anywhere else, but we had real success with just how we designed it. We used Twitter's sort of 4-photo framework, if you like, to just deliver the 4 scores that were happening out on the course at any one time. Just because of how that was designed and how simply that was delivered through a platform that everybody was already on, rather than, for example, trying to create something somewhere else and draw everybody over to another platform that they might not have been on at that particular time. We had really, really strong engagement. There was other stuff we did sort of experientially and PR-wise around all that, but we were quite amazed in some ways at how well that simple content cut through. And the guys who were delivering it up there were sort of sat in the media room like this and started seeing that a couple of other media businesses, and I'm not sure if there was another brand, started kind of pinching that format of idea, because we were following the feed, and then we started seeing stuff popping up that looked a bit like it, and they turned around and they could see that the guys were sort of sitting behind. So it's a sort of a close-knit world where we were saying earlier on how maybe this real-time thing is going to get a bit more tricky when everybody starts doing it, you know, within that 3 minutes, which is the sort of the golden window you're meant to deliver in. How do you stand out in that window? But it was pure simplicity of design and giving people what they want in that moment that worked for
Well, I'm
BMW.
going to ask you to take us from left now to right. Signals versus noise, right? If everybody's doing it, how do you make a determination what is really important and what is just out there?
I personally believe that sort of creativity and packaging of a piece of content has massive, massive importance. So you can all start from the same place. That might be fans want to know X at this particular point in time. Then you add to that, what do we as a brand want to communicate? And then you, out of that formula, come up with the piece of content that best resonates at that moment. And I honestly think it's as simple as that. Crucially, you have to sort of stand out, but that for me is not necessarily about then looking for something that's different to what they definitely want to know about, coming up with a new thing that you might try and kind of force on them. It's about taking what they want and finding a really beautifully crafted way of delivering it to them. So that might be a film, it might be some animated content, it might be something that you can do very cleverly with imagery, it might be something that involves an ambassador for a particular reason, but I think there's a lot to be said for creative craft in the sports marketing game and how that will help people stand out almost no matter what the club's at.
Alex, so you.
I agree with that, and I think that it sort of comes to the point that real-time marketing is marketing. You know, it's not like it's some new form of magic. I think you've got to understand your audience, you've got to listen to what your audience wants, and you've got to be, everyone talks about it these days, you've got to be authentic, you've got to be timely, obviously, in this case, because it's real-time marketing. But I think you can try and be too clever and just create a gimmick without actually thinking about your brand and who's listening to your message. And again, as Carlo was, happily referencing the Adidas guy earlier, I mean, I think he said in a way, all you need to do is focus on your own message and focus on that, and don't worry too much about the competition. And of course, there's going to be a sea of other messages in there. But if you're a top brand or you're a great agency, you're probably going to have very smart people who know how to deliver messages, and you might be competing up against. I'm not saying bookmakers are all terrible people, because Paddy Power are fantastic at what they do, but there's going to be a lot of variety in terms of the discipline that some of the brands you're shouting out against are sort of adhering to. So I think if you just follow the fundamentals and create something that's well crafted, as Josh says, then that's got to be the way, and that would be wonderful.
So what I'm listening to is obviously individualized platform strategies that are specific to 1 or 2, 3 goals maybe that you can measure. Let me ask you a question, not just on 7 League, but on your success at the Olympic Organizing Committee.
Okay.
When you were looking at signal versus noise, and that's a global event, okay? What are you doing now to try and dial into, that's a pure signal, we gotta listen to the customer, versus I've got all this other stuff?
Brand consistency visually is incredibly important. I don't think, to stand out, if everyone's fighting for a voice in the online space around a live event specifically, I think to make you stand out as the brand, having a consistent visual presence, to be consistent with your brand messaging is really important. Some brands don't get it right, it's not always consistent enough, so that image and that vision of the brand is not all about their logo, it's their messaging, and it will resonate and it will stick and it's memorable if it's consistent across every digital platform you're on. I see that sometimes on some brands take a different strategy for different platforms around one live event. It should be consistent across all because it's likely to impact more. I don't see enough of it, but some of the brands we work with, they have a content strategy specific for live events where they'll have themes and sort of, like Josh's comment about nice, stylised, iconic imagery, that sort of thing. If they make it relevant to certain events, then it's more likely to stick with the front-end consumer and they're going to engage with your brand more.
One thing to add is that you can also just pay so that people see it, obviously. So, and I don't think that's anything to kind of turn your nose up at. So, you put media spend behind ensuring that a certain volume of audience is going to be exposed to a piece of work that is beautifully done in its own right, whatever that means for whatever it's trying to do. I don't think it's always this massive kind of free-for-all that there are millions of people around the world looking at their phones, frantically deciding which thing to look at in that 1 minute. That might be the case in certain instances, but as often as we put stuff out there that we want people to organically kind of consume and like or do something with, we also will make something really nice and spend some money so that a lot of people see it. And there is still nothing wrong with that, even in this age of everyone talking about conversations and interactions and what have you. I don't think there's anything wrong with using social channels as in a way that you might use a more traditional advertising channel.
I'm going to address that point quickly because I think the three of us, we've all talked before, and I think everybody in this room experienced, the good use, the bad use, and the misuse, right? So the reality of it is, in my world, having had a company and moved it into a Comcast world, which is a much bigger umbrella, is that you find that their culture, their strategy is different, right? Chairman of the big division walks in and says, my grandson's using Snapchat, let's get the Snapchat.
Yeah.
What exactly does it do?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure, but it takes a picture, then it disappears. So how do you use that? Okay. So you're actually reverse engineering the deal. So let's talk about what I mentioned earlier, failure. And I can speak firsthand from this at Comcast. Comcast Spectacor is a wonderful company, but the fact is that the Americans didn't win so many medals during the U.S. Olympics here, their strategy would have failed miserably. Because Americans will watch us win anything, as long as we're winning something. But had we lost everything, no one would have watched anything, okay? And I stress that because in our world at Comcast, everybody said, we're the smartest people in the world. We had authenticated people. We had what we called SVOD, subscribers, video on demand. And they all came to Comcast to watch us do what? To win. Now we go back to the sponsors, the people you work with. Because without the sponsors, we actually don't have the funds to put on a team that can win something, anything. So each of you deal with sponsors and partners. What's your reaction to relationships when they have a good idea, and maybe they just do too much of it, and then it's no longer a good idea? And what's your reaction to when you say, hey, this is organic, you got to follow the lead?
Okay, so do you mean in terms of when a sponsor comes to me wanting to do something collaboratively?
Yes.
So first of all, we'll have the conversation about audience crossover. So what are our fans going to get from engaging with their brand, and what are they going to get from engaging with ours? So we need to see if there's a crossover in audience demographic, if there's a big population from both of the same sort of people, and then we tailor our content specifically to cater for that crossover. And then obviously we don't want to focus solely on those who fall into both. That's usually a very small margin, but ways in which we can tailor that messaging to reach more people in a engaging way without hammering home a really significant commercial message before we've engaged them on a personal level. So it's about finding a balance, but that's where I go back to my point earlier about knowing who your audience is. So looking at your insights regularly, using Google Analytics tools, what have you, to look and see who these people are and how you can sculpt that content to make it perfect for what you want to do.
Alex?
Well, we don't really work so much with brands and sponsors directly. We tend to work with rights holders and leagues and so on. But just an observation of getting to know some football teams and big sports organisations. I think, as Antonia says and as Josh says, and what strikes me as being incredibly obvious really is that you need to apply the same discipline, and if you're a football club and you want to speak to an audience, you need to know who that audience is and not just say, they're in Thailand, let's sort of translate a message automatically, and we won't think about what time of day that message goes out. We'll just send it out when our guys here in somewhere in the UK, because I don't want to get too close to any particular teams to point fingers. And there are clubs that will spend a lot of time and effort thinking, right, we've got to communicate with all these people in Asia because that's where the land grab opportunity is, and all the big clubs are after these. And then they will not quite carry through with the execution because they won't think about the nuances of the culture of that potential audience. They really won't think about simple things about time of day. It's 12 o'clock here, it might be 8 or 9 o'clock at night somewhere in Southeast Asia. So there's attention to detail on things like that. But the most important thing, I think, is working out who you're trying to reach in the first place. And to Josh's point about buying media, of course there's nothing wrong with buying media. You want to make sure the right people get your message as well. So it's not just saying let's spend this money so that the message doesn't get fired out into space and we hope people grab hold of it. It's like we know exactly who we're targeting. We want to reach a young audience of 16 to 24s or whatever in Southeast Asia, and we want to bring them towards our club. So you've got to know who you're targeting. You've got to listen to what they want. Then you've got to create the message, and then you've got to deliver it via the right platform. That's kind of where Omnigon really comes in, is in helping to create those platforms and make sure that they deliver the best experience possible. But I think so much of what we talk about in social media and new media is a lot of waffle, and people just forget about the necessary discipline of media and the importance of spending money wisely. And if you're a football club, they know about the importance of spending money wisely. And there's some very fundamental things that we should all be aware of, and when we're trying to work with these rights holders, we take that approach certainly.
Simply, I think in the digital and social game, there's lots of assumptions that are made because of all the noise that is out there. So one of them is that sports fans use social media because they crave belonging and they love sharing their opinions about something that they're hugely passionate about, and they're far more likely to engage in debate on this subject matter than anything else. A lot of that is true and works sometimes, but we've spoken to a lot of sports fans and a lot of research in this area. When you say to them, why do you use social media? They say it's because I can get something or various views on a particular moment in the palm of my hand very, very quickly within moments of it actually happening. So they put immediacy, variety of points of view and ease of access as their main reason why they use social media. That's not to say that sometimes the whole interacting, getting involved in experiences, using new technologies, using new platforms might not work as part of a brand campaign. It all depends why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. But to answer your question specifically, if someone comes to us with an idea that may be informed by a new piece of technology or an assumption about why people use social media, we will address that first and foremost. The biggest one is the technology one. This is the new thing, how can we use it? And it's such a cliche, but there was Jonathan Ive, the Apple designer, said technology is at its best when it simply disappears. So you don't even know what you're using, it's just you're getting what you want better. So try and apply that sort of thought to it. If a campaign is more about PR and getting a story out there, rather than a level of engagement, you might find that using a new piece of technology is part of the hook for the story, but it's important that you differentiate between the two.
We always look for different strategies to not just measure effectiveness, but also talk about something we used to call the dwell rate. the dwell rate of hanging on something, some information or pass-through, and was the dwell rate hanging higher or lower, and it was really almost a constant day-by-day measurement. The one element we would say to each of your point is the point of view of the viewer and the point of view of the person sending. In the National Hockey League, a team I will link, I know the three of us talked about it, will not be named here, but the ownership walked in and said, we need to be in this space. Went out the door and talked to every major blogger within their city. If they knew the National Hockey League and they liked hockey, they were blogging about it, and had a specific night for the bloggers. And 100 people ready to show up. They said, we're getting 100 people, let's really celebrate this because we can get our point of view. They're talking to all these other customers. Night of the show shows up, the event happens, and guess what? There's 18 people there. 18 people, the 100 people that they invited said, this is going to be great. It's a night just for you. First time the NHL said, we're going to do this. Problem is, most of the bloggers couldn't drive. They were less than 16 years of age. So the fact of the matter, to your point, time of day, to your point, know your audience, and to your point, your message, right? The fact was, it's a great meeting, and they know hockey. They're perhaps the most passionate. Doesn't mean that they come off the passion meter. It just means they just didn't know who they really were, right? It's the old dog in the internet question. I know we have a few minutes, and I want to make sure we get as many questions as we can. I do remind people when it comes to digital that the new 4-letter word is send, okay? And that gets a lot of our executives in trouble. I'm certain Bill Cosby would not like to go back in time and say, make a meme out of me, because now he's opened up a whole other can of worms. With that said, David, we'll open up the questions, I think, and let our esteemed colleagues. Yes, sir.
At what stage do you move from a platform like Facebook to actually developing an app?
Is that for me?
I think for all of you, because you deal with different areas, but yeah.
I don't think we currently would consider moving away from such an established platform, but it's always measuring what platforms your audience are using and whether an app is currently right. I mean, by device, certainly. If they're more active on a mobile device, then yes, you would definitely consider using that. The mobile desktop trend is, mobile is increasing quite significantly at a very fast rate. I don't think it's essential to have an app for content which can be distributed across different channels.
Yep.
I don't think you would segment it in that way solely for an app. Again, you've got to consider website as well, so it's how they all work sort of as a unit rather than just segmenting it onto one. I don't think you should consider moving away from established platforms too quickly, if I'm honest.
I would say, again, it's about the business of the client that you're talking to, and so if a client asks us that, which they do sometimes, they say, should we have a native app, or should we look at mobile web, or designing a site that's mobile first, which everybody talks about now, which is blindingly obvious again now, but a couple of years ago it wasn't necessarily, and one of our clients, the PGA Tour, came to us and said that they wanted to look at mobile first as their strategy, realizing that might actually jeopardize some of their advertising revenues that they've been happily garnering on the website by creating that focus. We worked with them, we listened to their business objectives and understood that they were looking to the future, and so we discussed it, we agreed it, we got on and did the job, and we migrated them from Turner Sports and set them up independently. So I think what you do is to talk to the person concerned and see if it makes sense for their business. And then again, does it make sense for their audience? Does it make sense for their fans? Are they well served by Facebook? Are they well served by Twitter or other channels at the moment? To Antonia's point, really, that you don't just need to create an app for the sake of it. You've got to make sure that you've got enough unique content to put in that app and enough essential content to put in that app. And nowadays, I think more people are looking at apps as a means of gathering data on their audiences and understanding their behaviours. So that's when you'd say, yes, you need an app, because if you have a native app, then you've got the chance to gather that data and to communicate with your fans by pushing messages to them, which of course you won't have through mobile web or through Facebook or anything else. But really, it's a case of let's really understand your business requirements, your audience, and what they want, and start from there.
But the Rugby World Cup app,
Yes.
4 years ago, was fabulous.
It was fabulous, and I hope you'll say that the next one.
I'll let you know.
It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, we're not saying that
No.
it's
That's very tournament specific though.
Yes,
so
it is.
you have a lot of people who are going to the events and want that sort of real-time experience on their device whilst they're at one. So that's different. But
Or live scores.
yeah, exactly, like live
accessible.
updates. Yeah, exactly.
I think this one will be a little bit more exciting in that there will be more for the fan in the stadium this time around, and there'll be so
Which is
more
the way
location-based messaging and exactly it's where the market's moving to, and I think that the last World Cup that was excellent, you know. So,
Josh, opinion on this?
Same.
Just a question for you.
yeah.
What percentage of people who go to a live sporting event just watch the sport?
Very small number. I'd say.
Versus what? Do things.
Doing
Second
things on
screening
that
or-
So do you mean how many people, what percentage?
So if you're at a 20,000 seater soccer or rugby stadium, how many people are sharing the moment, whether it be Twitter or
The big barrier
Wi-Fi.
is that normally you can't get Wi-Fi. It's a bit of a boring answer, but in most stadiums you can't really do what you want to do anyway. But if you can, like they can, for example, in Celtic Park or Real Madrid Stadium, you do see surprising number. I don't know the percentage, I'm afraid, but it's pretty massive. And upload is bigger than download. So the I am here, look where I am, look what I'm doing, isn't this great? Film, photo, boom, boom, is the bigger volume of traffic.
Yes.
Jim, on the soccer sports side, we had Kansas City for a number of years, and obviously they went technology crazy. The reality of it was a different experience. To your point, the latency issue was solved inside the village, if you will.
Yeah.
Then you could do something, and the mechanism for getting it, you use the iPad, the iPhone. The reality of it is, if you sat in Kansas City and watched a football match, you'd hear a goal and then look up because you were looking down first.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think everybody's talking about that, and you saw it only in Kansas City. We figured roughly 25% of our Philadelphia audience was using 80% of the available bandwidth in the house. Because they wanted to let everybody know, hey, I'm here, I'm hanging with this guy, and I saw that person. And so it really wasn't about what was happening on the ice. As everybody gets, I know you guys went into this deep building the Wi-Fi in the stadiums.
There was a really nice conversation I had with a load of football fans on a plane once to a match somewhere. I didn't know them, but I couldn't resist boring the hell out of them, asking them pretty much that question. And they were all frustrated that they couldn't use, and they were actually quite interested, they couldn't use their phones in stadiums. And I said, well, would you if you could? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, what about missing the moments? And they were saying, well, when you look down at your phone, you hear the rumble of the game. And it's not that you're going to miss a goal, because you're only going to look up when you hear the chip. You hear the crowd start to rumble, and that's when you look up and engage. And it was a really quite sort of subtle chat with them, but there's hunger for it. There's massive hunger for it.
What do you think, Jim? I mean,
listen, I'm
London Irish. I mean, do you want to have any of your
from a
guys
personal perspective,
looking at their phones?
it's if I'm sat watching a football or rugby match by myself at home, I have to talk to somebody about it. So I've got all the social platforms of the world under the sun to do it. I give my top and me worth to
Just
share with everybody.
Give me a call.
Offline, you guys. Any other questions we have for the colleagues? Yes, sir.
Alex Wilson from Sports Pro. I thought it was very interesting that Adidas sort of effectively chose to walk away from 3.5 million followers or whatever the number was. How far forward do you discuss with your clients once that campaign's over and you've got this great audience on whatever platform it is? What's the next campaign? How far do you look?
To get my quick answer out of the way, to be honest, our stuff always just sits within one handle. We haven't actually done the whole set up different handles for different things thing. We haven't really had to come across that. And I think normally we would try and keep different streams of content, if you like, running through one two feed. So for example, we run that at BMW Rugby, which is separate to the BMW kind of brand accounts, but everything we do for them in rugby sits within that feed. So it's not a very interesting answer, but we don't really go down that road in the first place. I think they probably have such a massive volume of stories to tell. The interesting with Adidas, right, is that they make sports stuff, don't they, which is sort of puts them in a slightly different world, I think, to brands like cars and drinks and stuff that are coming in. They've got a huge volume of stuff to tell and products to directly sell, so maybe that gives them so much to talk about, they need to start compartmentalising it.
Well, perhaps
Yeah.
But as he said as well, I think it would have been a bit naff if they'd said, this is the nephew of Brazuca or however he described it.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't mind starting again from a standing start because of the power of their brand and looking at each opportunity separately and saying, okay, that did 3.2 million, but this is a slightly different audience that we're targeting and a slightly different event that we're involved in.
I mean, they haven't lost, like, many of those 3.5 million that were following that would have been looking at 2 or 3 of the other 10 that they've got as well, so it's not like they've lost them and they've got to get them back. I think it's probably less dramatic than that.
Let me ask this question. How many people in the room, just by show of hands, have used or are using currently programmatic buying on their digital space? Okay, 1, 2, some of the larger agencies, they are. So this is a question that we want to, you asked a Facebook question. All right, one of the tricks of the trade on the entertainment side of Comcast was the executive producer walking in, don't cancel me, I've got 3 million of this, I got 5 million of that, and 6 of everything. The reality of it was, the great majority would come from Jakarta, Tel Aviv. We said, they're not watching us. You're buying these likes, right? And this is something that gets done. But more importantly, the carry rate, to your question, how long would we stay? It would only be effective to how they would authenticate the storyline. These guys build a platform where you can authenticate it individually. You don't have to worry on Turner taking the information and then selling it and packaging. That's why the independent strategy really works as a mature. From our standpoint, we were always looking at it, are they engaged with us in a certain period of time? Otherwise, we have to drop them off. The carry is no interest to them or us, and we just lose them. And we burn through our resale rates. Any other questions? Hey, broadcasting is still the easiest. Nielsen is announcing this week they're going to start doing the 7-day measurement, and they're going to start doing the offline digital measurement. I will tell you, back 9, very personally, we don't have a Nielsen rating. It hasn't stopped people from buying, because if you like golf and you're under 40 years of age, we're probably the space for you. If you don't like golf, you don't think younger audience, like some of the younger players, then don't buy. Some of it is such logical decision making. But in the case of Nielsen, they are starting to provide audits that say this is it. Our programmatic buying scenario is the biggest trouble we have. Because how do you plan for someone who literally could say, oh, I got more likes and more hits? You have to have somebody who knows the technology.
Real Madrid and Barcelona almost have like their own TV channel. That's why Adidas would be like the next step for them.
So,
that's not niche.
You're right. I think big clubs in football and any big sort of sporting organisation that has to behave like a broadcaster nowadays, or like a media owner, which I think is what you're trying to say. And they've got lots of different audiences that they need to chase, and they're in a sort of space race almost. They're looking at Man United and Liverpool and Arsenal and all these guys. They all want to compete with Real Madrid and Barcelona for the American football market, for Asian football markets. So they've got to gear themselves up. They've got to get the right platforms in place. But it's all underpinned by smart content strategy, smart marketing, all of that stuff. And what we try to do is to give them the delivery mechanism to grab those fans and entertain them and engage them.
You're giving us the 1-minute sign, and the Oscars, the music will start playing. But before it does, you have the last call. You tell us where the trends going, Antonia. Any of them. What are we going to read about tomorrow?
These shoots are a bit old.
Real-time video content, I'm a big fan of. Particularly if you have a subscription channel that you'd like your fans to be aware of and to buy into. Consistent brand messaging, I think. Once you have your imagery and stylistic photography nailed and your editorial guidelines set, I think your opportunity to engage with your audience is endless. I think there is opportunity to have a sense of humour. More brands have a sense of humour. That is not a trend, but it's something that I'm seeing more of, and I'd like to see a little bit more of, especially within the sports industry, because obviously most clubs are the authoritative voice of their sport and results and that sort of thing. But there is leeway, or particularly on social media, I talk about social media quite heavily, to have a sense of humour. So that combined with different variations of content on lots of different platforms makes you more appealing to a diverse audience.
Well said. Thank you all for participating.
Good job.
Great.